Oksana, thank you so much for being here with us and for that film. It's, I think, a remarkable document and takes the very concept of documentary in a direction that I think is surprising at times, because it is fully a document, but it requires this synthesis of image and sound that is a creative gesture on your part. And I wonder if you could just start out by speaking a bit about the origins of the film and at what point and sort of where you were when you came up with the idea of taking these pretty remarkable and remarkably upsetting audio recordings and pairing them with images of the aftermath of the invasion.
Thank you. I was in Ukraine when the Russian full-scale invasion started in February 2022, and unplanned, I happened to be working as a local producer with international reporters. At that moment, there was so much media attention to what was happening, and there was a big need of translators and local producers in Ukraine from the journalists who were coming to Ukraine from all over the world. And I never did this type of job before, but I thought that was the best thing that I could do at that moment. And that job required me to do something that I usually don't do as a documentary filmmaker. As a documentary filmmaker, I really love to talk to people and collect oral histories. As a producer, I often ended up waiting, standing in one place and waiting, for example, while the journalists with whom I worked were doing live streams from the places where the attacks happened, or after the liberation of Kyiv, Chernihiv regions. They were reporting about the aftermath of the occupation. So I happened to exercise this observation, which was very inspiring to me. And in parallel to this job, I developed a habit of listening to the intercepts, the phone calls of the Russian soldiers to their families that were released publicly on the official YouTube channels of the Ukraine security services from the very beginning of the full-scale invasion. And I used to listen to them online during the curfew time. And those two things, basically, those two experiences of being a witness and survivor of the Russian attacks in Kyiv, and at the same time listening to those voices full of hatred, voices that were explaining, giving all kinds of justifications for the invasion. Those two experiences were putting me in a state of cognitive dissonance, which eventually I tried to recreate in this film. Basically, those two experiences gave me the idea of this film, which was very simple, a juxtaposition of two parallel realities. But in practice, it was very difficult in making.
That leads me to a whole series of questions about the construction of this film, because I think a huge part of its power comes from the way in which you construct these images and construct this framework of placing them alongside the excerpts. So just to begin with, could you speak about your approach, your visual approach, the sort of image capture, your approach to moving through these spaces in Ukraine and identifying these tableaux that you wanted to show in these. I'm just curious about what led you to this way of showing these spaces.
in a way, my work as a local producer with the journalists was an inspiration, but at the same time an anti-inspiration. I was observing how the news were being made, and I often had the feeling that the images that are created and spread so widely in the news coverage, they don't really describe, or how can I say, they don't give much understanding to the people from outside of Ukraine of what is actually happening. They only show the surface of the war reality. So in a way, what I tried to do was to show the depths and show something that people don't see in the news. And to me, that was the tension, the horrible quietness of the war. Of course, there are attacks, but there are also this horrible sensation of time being suspended and hours of waiting for humanitarian aid, waiting for evacuation, waiting for all kinds of things. Life, in a way, stopped. Paradoxically, at the same time, it continued in its own way. It was taking new forms. We were sort of living this new normal life. And those were some of the reasons for us going for this type of filming. Another thing was that I wanted to show the scale of the invasion, and I wanted to show the space of Ukraine. One of the ideas I wanted to express with this work is an idea of expansion. I wanted to imagine the journey of the Russian invader from the moment he arrives to Ukraine, and how does it feel to move through that space that you invade? What is this space? And that led me to this approach of filming this film as some kind of road movie. We moved with my crew, we were 4 people, through different regions. We started filming in the north of Kyiv, and then we moved towards east and south. And we spent many, many hours inside of our vehicle.
Turning to the soundtrack, the audio recordings, I understand that you were drawing excerpts from a huge volume of recordings, and you've described that you sort of listened to them as part of a daily routine for a period of time. And when it came time to construct the film, what were you looking for in the conversations that you wanted to present to an audience, and what kinds of conversations caught your attention, and how did you go about selecting them?
We worked with approximately 31 hours of audio, nearly 900, a bit more than 900 unique conversations. And when I started working with this material, I was trying to be as honest as possible and as open-minded as possible. I was genuinely interested to understand what kind of thinking, what kind of mentality is behind the Russian invasion of Ukraine. But what really drew my attention right away were the conversations of the soldiers with their wives, sisters, mothers. I found them somehow different, special than the conversations between men. I felt that they were more personal, more intimate, more close to their mothers. And they were revealing more details about their everyday life and, most importantly, their feelings regarding them being in Ukraine and fighting.
There's well, I guess my next question is sort of connecting the previous two questions. Is so much of the sort of alchemy of the film comes from the selection, how you paired certain kinds of conversations with certain kinds of images, and it's quite poetic, I think, the effect that it creates, and quite mysterious. And I wonder if you could just go a little more into that process of matching images with conversation, or with the substance of the recordings. And what were you thinking about? Were you intending to evoke specific ideas with specific juxtapositions, or was it more sort of an organic two tracks that were developed in parallel?
Well, the matching work was real madness. It was really difficult, and the difficulty came from the very beginning, because when I came up with the idea of the film, I knew right away that I didn't want the images to illustrate the audio. I didn't want to create straightforward illustrations to what was being mentioned in the conversations. So in fact, we shot the majority of the images of the film before I went through all of the audio. Then there was a long period of working only with the audio, only with the conversations. But the actual matching, the montage of the film took almost 6 months, and of everyday hard work. And the very first months of editing, we only worked with audio. And I could say that the first rough cut of the film appeared in sound without any images. Only after the first months of editing, we started one by one, but not in any specific order. We just started trying, integrating images into our audio rough cut. And then the work was basically back and forth between the two things. But of course, for me, the real meaning of the film was at the stitch, at that exact juxtaposition of the two elements.
There's a real musicality, I think, to the film, both in terms of the soundscape, which is quite layered and quite. There's sort of this constant ambient tension that the soundscape creates, but also in the silences, in the alternation between spoken word and sort of these pauses that you set up between conversations, or between sort of scenes, for lack of a better word, which goes hand in hand with the rhythm with which you serve us these images. Were you thinking in terms of sort of a musical structure, or any sort of, how did you approach rhythm or pacing?
I don't know. I don't know. It was. I knew that with the sound, I wanted to recreate the tension that it was already present in the air in Ukraine, and that was very present in our footage. I wanted to show this stillness and, as I mentioned earlier, this suspension of time, and to somehow express the idea of present and the past at the same time. Each time we entered those empty apartments, ruined buildings, people's homes, that's what we witnessed, that's what we felt, as if there was this unknown and uncertain and tragic present. At the same time, there was also an echo of the past life, and we wanted to really capture that and give it even more strength with the sound.
I want to open it up to the audience. If you have a question, please raise your hand, and we have a mic that will come around to you. I see one hand right over here. Yeah.
Thank you. Can you talk just a little bit about your choice to include those shots of prisoners of war? Like, what was the thinking behind that section specifically? And did you ever feel like there was a need for verification of the audio material, or it was clearly for you that this was what it was, and it was the starting point of the film? I'm just curious about that too.
After listening for many months, this amount of audio, I somehow started feeling as if these people became abstract to me, as if they existed in my mind. It was almost, again, a feeling I was going crazy. and I had this strong feeling, need to face them as a human. And the only place I could do that was in the camp, in the prisoners of war camp in Ukraine. And we arranged access, it's possible. And I never had an intention to interview these people, because at that point of working on the film, I've already listened and heard enough. I just really wanted to see them. And to my frustration, they didn't look that much interesting. They looked very banal and boring, in fact. And that gave me another reason to include this scene in the film. Because when we hear these people, they start appearing monstrous to us. It's a story of dehumanization. These are the people who lost, to me, their dignity and humanity. But seeing them in real life, face to face, they look so normal and so banal. So that was my motivation to include this scene. And regarding the intercepts, luckily there were already, at the moment when I started working on the film, there were already many journalists who tried to track these people, to identify some of these speakers. The journalists in Ukraine, there was also a big project done by the New York Times. I didn't have, for me, that was not my interest, and it was not my goal to verify these conversations. But one interesting thing is that, so these are, I don't know these people, obviously. These are the intercepted phone calls. Some of them are identified now by journalists. But these type of conversations, we hear from so many people in Russia, from our friends and families in Russia. In Ukraine, so many Ukrainians have someone in Russia. And if we would talk to these people, we would hear very similar things. So in a way, that again didn't make me want to do this more journalistic work of authentication of the intercepts.
I think we can take another question. I see one in the middle in the back there. Yeah, here's the mic. Come around.
Thank you. So in documentaries, we usually get release forms signed by interviewees or anyone who appears in the film. Did you get any release forms from any of the people that appear in the film? What was your communication with them? I have this one image, what was the broken bridge and the little boat bringing someone over, and he comes very, very close to the camera. So I thought, did you get release forms from them? Did you talk to these people?
I do have release forms from most of the people we see close in the film. There were many images of, not that many, but there were some images of the lines of people or groups of people. In those cases, it's very difficult. I don't know if you're a filmmaker yourself. You probably know that it's very difficult to sign release forms and from a group of people. But for my whole crew, it's always one of the most important rules to be ethical and respectful towards the people we are filming. We are never hiding or never pretending we are doing something else. We are always very visible, and very often, well, in this film especially, I don't talk to Ukrainians, we don't hear the Ukrainians in the film. But to get these images, I would spend sometimes hours talking to people before filming them. So there was lots of work done to approach people like this and make them feel comfortable with us filming them.
I think I see one question right down here in sort of the middle. Mm-hmm.
Congratulations. It's a very powerful, creative document of a film. And I wanted something that you just said now, that you don't hear Ukrainian in the film at all, which was to me, because the whole sonic quality is of Ukraine with Russians, Ukraine without Ukrainian. And so it's a kind of, it evoked a kind of feeling of being behind enemy lines in the temporarily occupied territories of, so I was just wondering how, speak a little bit more about your comment now that you have Ukraine only with Russian soldiers speaking and no Ukrainian voices at all.
I think that this decision was very intuitive and profound, and it was evoked by my own feeling of being speechless when the invasion started. For a long time, I could not find any words to describe what was happening, the horror and the scale of horror that was happening in Ukraine. And I thought it would be more powerful to leave the images speak from themselves and people's postures and people's faces and simply observations over the details of their everyday life in a war. I thought that would be more powerful than perhaps hearing their voices. And then I imagine what those voices could be. It's probably not even voices, but cries. So that's why I took this way.
I'm sorry to say we're just about out of time, but I thank you so much, Oksana, for the film again, and thank you all.
Thank you.